Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. My name is Amy Wolf. I'm the programming director here at the Osterville Village Library. Thank you for joining us for today's program on ticks and insects, topics that are especially important for those of us who live, work, and enjoy the outdoors here on Cape Cod. As many of you know, warmer months bring more time outside, but they also bring increased activity from ticks and other insects that can affect our health, our pets, and our local environment. Understanding how these species live, where they thrive, and how we can better protect ourselves is an important part of living safely and sustainably in our community. We're fortunate today to have an expert who spends his time helping residents better understand these issues. Our speaker, Escher Cattle, serves as the town of Barnstable's entomologist and is an educator with the Cape Cod Cooperative Extension. Through work studies of insects and ticks in our region, and they help translate that, science into practical guidance for the public, whether that's identifying species, understanding disease risks, or learning effective prevention strategies. Please join me in welcoming Escher, who will share insights into ticks and insects we encounter here on Cape Cod.
Good afternoon, everybody. Like Amy said, I'm Escher Cattle. I work for Cape Cod Cooperative Extension as an extension educator in entomology and horticulture. Part of what that means is that I work with the Master Gardener training program on both their regular programming as well as learning more about insects and entomology and how that relates to the horticultural topics that they work on. But also that means that I'm in charge of the tick-borne disease prevention program. And that's what I'm going to talk to you about today. I'm going to talk to you about the ticks that we have and what they can do to you and how to avoid them. So things you might already know about ticks are that they are parasitic blood feeders. They are arachnids, which means they have no antennae and they have 8 legs. Larval ticks have 6 legs, but shortly after they have 8, just like any other arachnid. A fun thing about them that you can also delineate them from insects with is that their mouth parts are visible from above, meaning that you can look at any of these ticks from above and see those little bits sticking out from the front are their mouth parts. And we know that ticks can spread disease via their bites, whether it's by bacteria, viruses, parasites, or just stuff that's already in the tick, like their saliva. So we've got 3 main species of human biting ticks on Cape Cod. We've got more, but only these 3 are really known to bite humans. The first one you may well know is the deer tick or black-legged tick. The scientific name is Ixodes scapularis, and it is the vector of most of the most common tick-borne diseases on the Cape. Its preferred hosts are small rodents when it's small, and birds and small mammals. And then they move up gradually to one of their most preferred hosts, which is the white-tailed deer. And sometimes they get into another host, humans, that is kind of a dead end otherwise, but still gives them blood. They prefer cooler, shadier woodland habitats, and they don't have eyes, not at all. Next up, we've got the Lone Star tick, which is Amblyomma americanum. The Lone Star tick we call kind of like a recent arrival to Cape Cod, but we actually do have evidence that the Lone Star tick was up in the Northeast during like colonial times and beforehand. So Lone Star ticks can also communicate a couple of different diseases that we'll go over in a sec, but they can also cause alpha-gal syndrome, which we'll talk a little bit about later as well. They are a generalist parasite that generalist parasite means that they can take blood from a wide variety of hosts and still be healthy and viable. A lot of what they end up on as immatures is ground-dwelling birds and small and medium mammals like I was talking about mice and raccoons and possums and the like. As they get larger, they also have kind of a preference for the white-tailed deer, and they can follow us around as well. They live in more variable habitat. My friends in health and environment like to call the Lone Star tick a super tick because it is very sturdy and a little bit more of an aggressive biter than the other 2 species that we usually talk about. And this is one of the main species that has a very, very simple pair of eyes. You can see some dark dots on the front of the adult male and adult female, just at the back of the mouth parts and start of the body. These can't really form pictures like your or my camera eyes can, but they can kind of sense some differences between dark and light. Also with eyes is the dog tick, or I believe we also call them the wood tick, which we know in Latin as Dermacenter variabilis. They prefer mammals of pretty much any size. The only stage that is known to communicate disease to humans is the adult stage, and they like pasture habitats, so like your fields, your meadows, and sometimes like lawns if they're a bit overgrown. So right now it is beginning kind of mid-March. So we're seeing mainly deer ticks that have been hanging out over the winter. And we're going to start seeing Lone Star ticks and American dog ticks in their adult stages pretty soon. As you can see, during the winter, deer ticks are active as adults, but our other two species of ticks and the younger stages of the deer ticks are not terribly active. They're in a kind of quiescent, not necessarily hibernating, but slowed down stage. But you can see that once, coincidentally, our tourist season ramps up, when we more than double our population on Cape Cod, the ticks come back. We get our Lone Star ticks, we get our dog ticks, we get our younger deer ticks. And with that comes people being exposed to ticks and tick-borne disease. So you can see on this most recent report of emergency department visits from mass.gov that exposure and disease frequency coincide with these calendars. Ticks of different species are questing year-round, with a spike of emergency department visits being from tick exposure from mid-April to mid-August, and again in October, November. You saw on the chart on the previous slide that that's mainly when adult deer ticks are becoming active, and that means that just because the weather begins to cool doesn't mean the ticks are gone. 2025 saw higher exposure visits than 2024, but thankfully fewer disease visits, which means that we saw as many or more ticks as the previous year, but that people are aware they need to seek medical attention for tick exposure, which is good. That's a good thing. You can see, though, that while frequency of visits is much lower in winter, it's not actually zero. I'd like you to keep that in mind for when we talk about prevention later. Because tick-borne diseases are no joke, and the same medications won't cure or stave off the kinds of diseases that you can catch from a tick bite. Common symptoms of most of these diseases involve fever or chills, rashes, persistent headaches, nausea and vomiting, aches and pains on the milder end of things. Diseases like Lyme or tularemia can manifest in the outer skin and interior flesh, in the respiratory and nervous systems, and can have long-lasting effects even after the main infection period has ended. As you can see in this helpful graphic from the Martha's Vineyard Tick Program, well, made by Leah Hamner, who works at the Martha's Vineyard Tick Program, there are 8 common diseases and 1 allergy that are communicated by tick bites on the Cape, and each of our human-biting ticks can have different diseases. For the most part, deer ticks, like I said, are the biggest vector of common serious diseases. And again, deer ticks are the ones that are able to keep questing in the winter when conditions are right. One last thing to note is that not all diseases communicated by tick bites come from the same kind of organism. Antibiotics may help against a bacterial infection, but won't be as helpful against a parasite or a virus, which is why it's important to understand which diseases ticks might be carrying. So these are numbers of deer ticks tested for disease in the last 5 years from Tick Report, which is a company arisen out of UMass Amherst that Barnstable County has partnered with for tick testing. I just want to illustrate to you in the numbers on the far right that around 42% of our deer tick adults and 27% of the nymphs tested carry at least one disease on this table. That means if you're bitten by a tick and you don't get to it immediately, your chances of not contracting a disease are just a little better than a coin flip. And
a little better than a what?
A coin flip. And like I said, while Cape Cod only has a population of around 220,000 people year-round, we see a significant tourist season that more than doubles that population. I've heard from some people that it even triples. Seeing that Barnstable County saw from 10 to 25 per 100,000 means that we saw a minimum of around 50 to 125 cases just from emergency department visits, most of them coming from children under 14 and adults over 55. And beyond the diseases that can be communicated by ticks based on bacteria, viruses, or parasites, Lone Star tick bites can cause people to develop an allergy to many animal products called alpha-gal syndrome. The component is in many things we already consume with little issue, but the introduction of the allergen through the skin barrier instead of through the digestive system puts our immune systems on high alert for what it now sees as a foreign entity. That means that substances the body used to see as normal will cause the immune system to freak out and produce histamine, which causes these allergic reactions that vary from imperceptible to extremely severe. So alpha-gal syndrome diagnosis is also based on multiple different checks. Like, in order to get diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome, 3 things need to happen. First, you need to actually be experiencing symptoms, so having an allergy rather than just a sensitivity. You need to do serum testing, so you need to get your blood checked for whether or not that antibody is in your bloodstream. And then you need to have a positive response to an elimination diet. So let's say that you were eating meat and then like 4 to 6 hours later, you had like just the most miserable headaches, nausea, vomiting, and you had hives and everything. In part, that's why we call alpha-gal the midnight allergy, because it often presents itself late at night after people have eaten meat for dinner. So you would go to a doctor and then you would do serum testing because you would already have symptoms. And then your doctor would tell you that you have to cut meat out completely for a little while and see if that helps. And if it does help, you can finally get to the point where you can be diagnosed with alpha-gal syndrome. And just cutting out products like meat, dairy, gelatin, also the kind of gelatin that they put in medicine capsules, so that can be very inconvenient. There are a bunch of different medicines that do contain animal products that you have to be really careful of if you have alpha-gal syndrome. On top of that, while symptoms may fade over time, they can you can be resensitized if you are bit by a tick again. And symptoms can also be exacerbated by alcohol, exercise, and NSAID painkillers. So now that we've talked about a bunch of scary stuff, let's talk about tick behavior and ecology. So we have a lot of ticks on the Cape, and there are a couple of reasons for that. One of the reasons is that it's been easier and easier to get stuff from point A to point B. So it's been easy to get all different kinds of animals and plants from point A to point B. That's how many invasive insects have been introduced into our systems. And ticks, which technically are native but still get around, are not really an exception to that rule. Common hosts like deer and turkey were not as prevalent on the Cape. Some of them were nearly extinct on the East Coast in the early 1900s due to overhunting. But nowadays, both due to hunting laws and the fact that we just don't eat them as much as we used to, like I've never seen venison at a grocery store. Like those are no longer common food sources for people. So those populations are free to boom. And a lot of those generalist species do very, very well in the kind of fragmented forest habitats that we live in. We have a lot of forests on the Cape, a lot more than we used to. There used to be a lot more clearing for fields. And hosts for ticks do very well in those settings where they can hide, but they can also get around. And like I said, hunting is often illegal or difficult in suburban areas, partially for very good reason. Climate change also extends the northern range, which is part of why we've been seeing Lone Star tick again. Their hosts and the ticks can stand the colder temperatures that we're getting on the Cape because those temperatures are getting a bit warmer. So this is the life cycle of the deer tick or the black-legged tick. Our human-biting ticks are what we call 3-host ticks. They take 1 blood meal per stage of their life, 1 in the larval stage, 1 in the nymph stage, and 1 in the adult stage. You'll see as they're smaller, these hosts can include stuff like birds and mice, but also include deer, raccoons, foxes, small mammals, and humans if they can get to us. Then a larval tick will take that host and then take up a blood meal and then drop off and wait to metamorphose into a nymph the next year, which will then take a host and then drop off and then become an adult, which will then take another host and then lay a bunch of eggs for the next generation. So the method by which ticks find their hosts mostly relies on a couple of organs in what would be analogous to their wrists. These are called the Howler's organ. They can detect carbon dioxide, heat, vibrations, and different kind of scent compounds that come out of our skin. So stuff like the compounds that are in our sweat or lactic acid from us moving around. They're looking for a bunch of these different cues because their preferred hosts also put out these cues. And the Howler's organ can sense a heat source from up to 4 meters away, which for a tick that's like this big is enormous distance. So the tick's Howler's organ senses a source of heat and a source of carbon dioxide and the vibrations from something tramping around in the forests. And it will climb up to like from the ground to 3 feet, about as high as it can get. And then it'll stick its little arms out like it wants to be picked up, which is exactly what it wants. And then the tick will wait for something to brush by it. And then it'll grab right on with its little fun claws. And then it will be on the host and ready to walk around and find a place to bite. So you're getting this instead of the scary video that I got from Deep Look. We're going to look for a sec at the mouth parts of the tick. So it's kind of like, I should have thought of a better way to describe this, but the best way I can think about it is, you know how cups you'll get with lids from like a fast food place have sort of like the place for you to stick your straw. So the straw is able to get in because there's already a hole in there, but the tick can't necessarily do that, but it wants to open up your skin like you do through the top of a soda cup. So it's using those chelicerae up at the top to kind of hold skin cells steady while it squishes the hypostome further and further in. And you'll see that the hypostome is barbed so that it can stay in place while it's pushing stuff in. It's much easier to get that in than it is to get it out. I know. So you'll also notice that there's a channel going down the hypostome. So when the tick gets down to where it's actually trying to get the blood, it will use those chelicerae in the hypostome to suck up the blood like through a straw. Very straw-like here. So I am about to show you a different scary video. There's no sound, so you don't need to worry about that. This is Lone Star tick larvae. So the beginning stage of Lone Star tick. And one of the things that they do is they have kind of a gregarious behavior. They like to hang out together when they're larval in what we call tick bombs. So I'm going to turn that on until you can see it. Hello, please. Please play. Good golly. Well, I'll just have to tell you about it. So the larval tick bomb, the video illustrates it very well, but what happens is that all of these ticks all over here, they're on a blade of grass and they climb all the way up and they're hanging out together waiting for something to go by instead of just one tick. And these ticks are so tiny, smaller than a poppy seed. And once something brushes by, they will get on and they'll start spreading out really, really fast. And we're talking like hundreds of ticks, hundreds of tiny, tiny ticks that you won't even feel bite you until after it's all done. And this is a very scary thing that you will need to watch out for in the kinds of habitats that ticks like to hang out, which we'll talk about here. So the 3 different species of human biting ticks have slightly different preferences on where they like to be. Like I mentioned before, the deer tick likes to hang out in more shady, wooded habitat, but it's also possible to find them in edge and turf habitat. Now, edge is, for lack of a better word, the edge between managed and unmanaged land. Turf, we're talking about like your mowed lawns. But an edge is kind of like tall, shabby grass or like a little bit of shrubs that are between that turf and the unmanaged woodland. Now, we do have a lot of this on Cape Cod. Behind the apartment that I live in, there's like a bunch of edge habitat that's between my porch and the woods that are behind the place. So like it's everywhere. Our wood ticks, our dog ticks, like I said, prefer pasture habitat. So you're more likely to find them in that edge and on the turf. They like things a little sunnier. They like things a little drier. The Lone Star tick doesn't necessarily have a preference. It will go where the hosts are. It could be in the woods. It could be in the edge habitat. It could be on the turf. It has gotten bad enough at Martha's Vineyard that my friends who work in the tick program there have said, basically, unless you're on pavement or bare dirt, it's possible to get a Lone Star tick. But now that I've scared you, let's talk about what we can do about it. Personal protection is pretty much paramount right now. We're still doing so much research on how we can really work with the root causes of tick-borne disease. But the best things you can do in the meantime are a couple measures to protect yourself. And these are, in fact, no more complicated than fastening your seatbelt, or looking both ways when you cross the street, or putting on sunscreen when you're going to go out in the sun. First thing you can do is wear tick-safe clothing. And I'm sure you've all heard about the wearing light-colored pants, light-colored shirts so you can see ticks if they're on you and remove them. But I know a lot of people don't necessarily think that the look of tucking your pants into your socks is super cute. There are a couple alternatives. You don't necessarily have to sacrifice feeling like you look good if you're going to be in tick habitat. If you've got joggers or pants that have like elastic ankles, that's really good. You want some constriction around your ankles so that it's difficult for a tick to get in. Ticks are resilient, but they're not very strong. They can't lift up your clothes. They can only get under spaces that exist. Leggings, also really, really good when it comes to preventing a tick from getting onto your skin. And I understand in the summer, wearing long sleeves and long pants and long socks probably isn't ideal, but you could also invest in UV protective clothing or clothing that breathes very well, stuff that can still protect you from ticks and not necessarily keep you boiling. There are also gaiters that you can put over your pants and socks so that you don't have to tuck your socks in. They don't necessarily look cute, but they're really useful. One of the other things you can do, and one of the best things that you can do, is have permethrin-treated clothing. Now, permethrin is in fact a pesticide. It works as a neurotoxin against ticks. And if you have a piece of permethrin-treated fabric and the tick goes on it, you can watch that tick die on that permethrin-treated clothing, which I understand would be enormously satisfying. There are a couple options for getting permethrin-treated clothing. You could treat them yourself. You could go to a hardware store or an outdoor store and get a spray bottle of permethrin. And as long as you use it correctly, according to the instructions, it works for about 6 washes. So it's good for people who aren't living on the Cape full time and are not outdoors that much, but will need to go from time to time. You can treat it by yourself. You could treat dog blankets and stuff. So if your dog runs around in tick territory, you could have them hang out on that treated blanket and the ticks would come in contact with that permethrin and die off. You kind of have to be careful about it with cats because they metabolize the pesticide a little differently. And also they clean themselves by licking themselves. And permethrin is not meant to be taken internally. So you might have to figure something else out about it. But you can get it yourself. You can do it yourself as long as you follow the instructions. It's perfectly safe, even for children and infants. You could also get pre-treated clothing, which means that you don't necessarily have to worry about, oh, am I doing this correctly? Am I using a well-ventilated enough space? Or you don't have to worry about, did some of this get somewhere else? I know a lot of people are nervous about the idea of applying pesticides to their own clothing and thinking about, well, what am I putting on myself? So getting pre-treated clothes is a good solution to that. There are lots and lots of places that you can get pre-treated clothing. I know the LL Bean out in Mashpee Commons has it. There are a number of different outdoor stores that carry pre-treated clothing. You could also send your own clothes in to be washed. You could send in clothes that you like wearing to a company like Insect Shield or just Insect Shield because there are no other companies that currently do it. And they will treat your clothes professionally. They will send them back to you. And those clothes will be good for 70 washes. which could be the entire life of the garment. It could be longer than your clothes actually last. You would still have to get new clothes to wear that are treated because you can't wear clothes that don't exist. They'll already be dry and safe to wear when you get back. The only problem is that their equipment doesn't currently work on shoes or waterproof items or items that can't be tumble dried. So you may want to consider that if the clothes that you want to wear are like, for instance, dry clean only, which I don't know why you'd be wearing that outside, but you might have to consider it. The kinds of things that need to be treated. You don't have to treat everything. You just need to treat the stuff that you are wearing on the outside of your body, the stuff that ticks are most likely to get on. So like your outer shirt, your pants, your shoes, your socks. You do not need to treat your undergarments. You don't got to worry about it. Like I mentioned, pre-treated clothing, you can get at a bunch of different places. Insect Shield is partnered with a bunch of these different companies like Orvis and Bourne and Rohan, and like I said, LL Bean. And those companies provide clothing that has already been treated by Insect Shield that you can purchase from them. They'll often list these items as tick-proof or insect-proof. I know LL Bean's collection is called the No-Fly Zone. It works on mosquitoes as well as ticks. Applying for Methrin yourself, I know we've talked about it potentially being a little nerve-wracking to apply pesticides to stuff yourself, but it is actually pretty simple. You read the label instructions as you would with any pesticide product. You apply it in a ventilated area so that you're not getting any kind of like cross contact, and you hang it up to dry where it won't be disturbed so that it can dry safely and you can wear it when it's ready. If you're doing any gardening or yard work, you are probably a lot more exposed to ticks than you would be otherwise. And you might want to consider a little bit of extra protection. For instance, you're going to have your head and your hands a lot closer to the ground and the brush than you would normally if you were, for instance, walking on a trail. So you may want to consider a hat or a headband, or one of the master gardeners I work with has a treated like bandana that she wears around her neck because ticks like to get all the way up to your head and neck. Garden sleeves and gloves are also a good consideration because there's no way you can't get your arms and hands in there. Like those are your main tools. A final note on clothing, you don't have to treat everything. At full seasons, Tick Smart wardrobe can fit in a single drawer. This is a picture from my buddy Patrick Roden Reynolds, who is one of the main guys working on Martha's Vineyard for ticks. And this is all of his treated clothing for a season. You'll notice that he doesn't necessarily wear the light colors, and that's because his clothes are permethrin treated. So he doesn't necessarily have to worry about, oh, can I see the ticks that are on me? He knows that those ticks are, if they're on there, they're going to die. And he's wearing clothes that work well in the conditions that he's working in. He's wearing the right clothes at the right time because he does a lot of his work outside and he needs to consider that. But also we can't be covered head to toe anytime that we want to go outside. For that, there's repellents, and repellents are safe to use on your exposed skin. There are three main kinds of repellents that we use for repelling ticks, and they often also work on mosquitoes. So we've got DEET, picaridin, and oil of lemon eucalyptus, which have all shown to be effective. The EPA has a really nice tool where you can put in what you want protection from, how long you want it, and if you're interested in any kind of particular active ingredient, and it can tell you like which repellent is going to be right for what you're doing. One of the other main things you can be doing is checking your body for ticks consistently. And because a tick can be smaller than a freckle or look just like a little piece of dirt, it's helpful to also do this not only with your eyes, but with your hands, because you can feel a small and hard lump a little easier than you can decipher whether or not that is a tick or a piece of dirt. So you're going to want to check in and around your hair and in and around your ears, all around your hairline, under your arms, on your neck, especially where fabric meets skin or where fabric meets fabric. Everybody in tick health likes to say check your crevices. So like check your groin, check the backs of your knees, check your ankles, anywhere that there's any kind of constriction. So if you have a ponytail, check your ponytail holder. Ticks tend to stop where there's resistance. So anywhere that there would be that kind of resistance is where you should look for them. You can also make a tick kit. Some of these are commercially available, especially the stuff that's in bold. This tick kit is, I believe, one of the kinds that you can get in bulk commercially and like hand out to people at conventions and stuff. And it has the tweezers and the alcohol wipes and the ID guide and magnifying glass. But other recommendations are, for instance, if you didn't know you were going to be going out into the woods that day, it would be still helpful to keep a like pair of permethrin treated socks and or pants in your car, or a bottle of spray permethrin, a hand mirror in case you don't have a buddy to help you check hard to reach areas. A lint roller is really, really good when it comes to checking yourself for ticks, because the stickiness of the lint roller can pick up stuff that you can't see and is a lot easier to get everywhere than a pair of tweezers. Tape also works in this case. Personally, I like a lint roller because it's easier to move around. So, a summary for your best personal protection habits are: before you go, try to dress well for ticks, wear repellent on your exposed skin, and the best tip we can give you is wearing treated outerwear and shoes. While you're out, try to avoid places that ticks hang out. Check your body for ticks as often as you can, and then keep a tick kit handy in case you get bitten by a tick. After you get back, you can take off your clothes and take a shower, wash your clothes on high heat and dry them on high heat. While you're in the shower, do another thorough tick check on your body. If you take a shower and put your clothes on high heat in the first 2 hours after you get home, you can greatly reduce your chances of contracting a tick-borne disease, because ticks need about like 24 hours to get to the point where they're starting to actually communicate that disease to you. So the sooner you can get a tick off your body, the better. And the heat of the dryer will kill ticks because ticks hate to be hot and dry. For your pets, if they spend time outside, you need to be checking their bodies for ticks. You can check all the similar kinds of crevices. I know that ticks like to get up in between the legs of a bunch of animals and under the collar where there's that constriction. There's a bunch of kind of preventative care available for cats and dogs. There are some special considerations for cats, like I mentioned earlier, because they can't handle permethrin, but dogs totally can. If you have a dog, you could be using the same permethrin for you and your dog. And currently there's a Lyme vaccine available for dogs, so you could keep them from getting Lyme disease. One of the other things you can do is do some cultural control around your landscape to make sure that your habitat is not as friendly to ticks and their hosts. So making it so that there are more of those hot, dry areas around the border of your property will make it so that ticks are less likely to come in past that border. You can make it so that you are getting visited less by deer with exclusion fences. And I think they might also work on turkeys. You can plug up and remove hiding spots. You can move wood piles, and you can move fallen leaves to make it so that it's less likely that mice will be hanging around in them, because ticks like to also prey on mice. You can clear tall grasses and mow frequently, but it also isn't a zero-sum game. I know there are a lot of people on the Cape who are very ecologically minded. For instance, there's the movement from the Xerces Society to leave the leaves for insect habitat, because a lot of really nice insects that we like overwinter under the leaves on our yards, but that's also exactly where ticks like to hang out. So you can kind of compromise between those things by moving those leaves to an area that you don't use very often, or only doing a lot of mowing where you are hanging out like all the time, and where your kids are hanging out, and where your pets are hanging out. And like, there are plenty of things that you can kind of make incremental progress on to make your yard less friendly to ticks. And just because you're seeing ticks doesn't mean you're being bitten by ticks. When you're considering whether or not you want to actually spray with pesticides, you can think about how much you're getting bitten by ticks as opposed to how many ticks you're seeing, because no tick bites is a lot more feasible than no ticks at all. But if you want to focus your efforts anywhere, it's in excluding hosts, making sure that you can avoid having turkeys and deer and mice in your yard. Can go a long way. I'll wait for you to finish your photo. So, a word about possums and guinea fowl. I'm sure at least some of you have heard that possums are big tick eaters and that you can get guinea fowl as tick control agents. That is simply not true. Guinea fowl do not eat ticks in large enough amounts to be effective control, and the myth that possums eat a lot of ticks is actually based on a poor research practice that has been disproven since I think around 2021 or 2023. The experiment itself was testing a bunch of different animals to see how quickly that ticks could finish feeding on them and how many ticks would finish feeding on them. They didn't find any below the cages of the possums, so they assumed that the possums had eaten them, but didn't check the possums' bodies where the ticks would hang out. Now, I think this is because possums have lower body temperatures than other animals, which could affect how long it takes the tick to become fully replete. But nevertheless, lots and lots of studies have disproved it, doing even like full checks of the guts of possums to be like, there's no ticks here. They're not eating them. Along the lines of more tick myths, they actually don't really drop down from trees. It's fully possible that a tick could climb up a tree and that a tick could get out on a branch and fall down. But the likelihood that that would be on purpose or that that would work and they would get on a host is extremely small, like super, super unlikely. A tick likes to hang out where the animals that it's going to be feeding on are, which are around the first 3 feet to the ground. Because that's where everybody's walking around. That's where the stuff's going to brush by. That's what works. Another myth is that only 70 to 80% of people who have contracted Lyme disease get that classic bullseye rash. There are a couple different kinds of rashes that you can get if you have Lyme, and you should be looking out for other symptoms as well so that you can get diagnosis and treatment as soon as possible. Another one is, I've never heard this from people, but I've read it, that people think ticks burrow all the way into the skin. That's just swelling from irritation around the tick. The tick can only get its mouth parts into you. It's literally not equipped to get all the way in. And again, I've never heard of anybody actually doing this, but you should not use soap, petroleum gel, nail polish, burning, or any kind of like chemical means other than mechanically. Any other means than mechanically getting that tick and pulling it out will not be good for removing a tick and could in fact increase your chance of contracting an illness. Because that tick is going to be upset and irritated. It's going to barf up everything that it's got. And that could include bacteria or parasites that will make you sick. We talked about this before, but I actually wanted to just draw a cute little picture of a tick in a scarf and mittens. Ticks do not die over the winter. Ticks slow down their metabolisms over the winter so that they can continue going without having to feed or having to move around very much. And ticks don't freeze to death because their hemolymph can produce antifreeze molecules. I know we had a very cold and snowy winter here on the Cape, and we were a little bit hopeful that maybe it would do something against our ticks, but because we had so much snow, that created an insulating layer that protected the ticks from the colder air. And as I mentioned before, on a mild day in the winter, adult deer ticks can still walk around in quest. So if it's above 35 or 40 degrees, they can still be out and about looking for a meal. So if you get bit by a tick, you should remove it immediately. The best way to get rid of a tick is to use a nice firm pair of tweezers to grab the harder exoskeletal part of the tick as close to the mouth as you can possibly get, and then pull it out completely perpendicular to the bite. After that, you can put it in a sealed container or wrap it in tape or put it in alcohol and keep it aside to talk to your doctor and show them the tick and or get your tick tested if you like. You should wash out your bite with soap and water or rubbing alcohol to prevent a different infection from the wound. Just, don't crush it between your fingers. Don't use burning or petroleum. And, make sure that you're just being careful about it. Monitor yourself for symptoms like the headache, like the rash, like nausea over the next couple of weeks, because you can start getting symptoms from a disease that you catch over the next couple of weeks. But Disease communication usually occurs after the first 24 hours of being bitten. So, like I said, you want to get rid of that tick as soon as possible. Alpha-gal syndrome, we currently don't know the minimum amount of time that it takes to communicate it because it's not a disease so much as an allergy. It works completely differently. We're still researching and learning so much about it. I mentioned tick testing. I'm sure a bunch of you are familiar. We've had in Barnstable County a partnership with Tick Report where Barnstable County residents can get discounted tick testing to show what diseases that the tick that they have been bitten by might have. You can still do this, and it can help you talk to your doctor about what treatments you might need. In summary, we've got different ticks around the Cape that can cause different diseases. They're here around the entire calendar year. They're not going away. And you can do a bunch of things to keep yourself safe, like making sure you check your body, check your family's bodies and your pets for ticks after you spend time outside. You can make sure that you and those around you have tick-safe clothing and other stuff to wear. Make sure that you've got repellents so that you can still enjoy the outdoors while staying safe. Consider permethrin-treated clothing. It is the most effective thing that we have right now to protect ourselves from ticks. And you can also make it so that you have easy access to a way to remove ticks by keeping a tick kit around. And you can do cultural control on your yards and lawns and other parts of your landscape to make it less friendly to ticks. Like I said, if you're bitten by a tick, remove immediately and wait to see if you actually get sick. Right here, there is a QR code to Insect Shield to use this Cape Cod 2026 code. I'm actually in a little bit of a contest with the Martha's Vineyard tick people to see if we can get the most people using our coupon codes. They have their own, we have our own. Insect Shield is the only company that we currently know of that can treat your clothing. And I believe currently it is at like $9.50 per piece. And socks count as one piece of clothing. Like a pair of socks is one piece. So yeah, you could get your clothing treated for 15% off. I'm actually waiting on my clothes from Insect Shield right now to start my field season with. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.